What's the meaning of fate? You shall know.
I am not very fond of conflict.
Final round. Fight!
Sword spot right there! Sword spot! Yeah! Sword spot! Sword spot! Sword spot! Sword spot! Top! Top! Spider! Sword spot! Sword spot! Sword spot!
KO! Rose wins!
That is the truth of what you must.
Let's begin.
Final round. Fight!
Pyrokinesis! Die! Pyrokinesis! Meteor! Die! Meteor! Die! Meteor!
KO! Gil wins! Be afraid. Now you gaze upon your death!
No need for talk. Let's do this.
Final round. Fight! KO! Kage wins!
Let's begin.
I am not very fond of conflict.
Final round. Fight!
Launch! Away with you! Take that! Launch!
Perfect KO! Falk wins!
Well unit zero. Activate.
My name is Seth.
Final round. Fight! Perfect KO! Menot wins! Final round. Fight! KO! Akuma wins!
始めよう。この道を進むのみ。
Final round. Fight. Perfect KO. Alex wins.
逆まく風のラシード、それが俺の名だ。
No need for talk. Let's do this.
Final round. Fight. Perfect KO. Rashid wins.
かましたね。おっしゃいくぞ。
貴様。Final round. Fight. KO. Mika wins.
Want to see my kung fu? I'll show you.
Final round. Fight.
Take this!
Perfect KO. Chun-Li wins. Final round. Fight.
Hadouken! Taria! Hadouken! Taria! Hadouken! Hadouken! Taria! Hadouken! Taria! Taria! Hadouken! Hadouken! Taria! Taria!
Perfect KO. Ryu wins.
Come on, let's turn up the heat.
Your words are not needed.
Final round. Fight.
Hadouken!
Perfect KO. Ken wins.
For those who I wish to protect, I will fight you!
Want to see my kung fu? I'll show you.
Final round. Fight! Perfect KO! Cammy wins.
我が美に酔いしれるがいい。
ダーンって始めてパパッと終わらせちゃうよ。
Final round. Fight! Perfect KO! Vega wins. Final round. Fight! Perfect KO! Necalli wins.
No need for talk. Let's do this.
運命って何なのか考えたことあります？
Final round. Fight!
Sonic boom! Sonic boom! Sonic boom! Right there! Sonic boom! Sonic boom! Right there! Sonic boom! Sonic boom! Right there! Sonic boom!
Perfect KO! Guile wins.
こんなところでお会いするの。
Harmony. That is the truth of what you must seek.
Final round. Fight!
かわせるかしら。かわせるかしら。こっちよ。
注意。
こっちよ。
Perfect KO! Colleen wins.
Red
work just isn't my thing, you know? Looks like I can have a little fun now.
運命って何なのか考えたことあります？
Final round. Fight.
Give off! Got it! Got it! Got it! Got it! Got it!
Perfect KO. Cody wins.
Can't start the show without the star, right?
2分で終わらせるですよ。
Final round. Fight.
Kick some ass! Come here! You hate it! Scram! Online! Right there! What the
Perfect KO. Poison wins.
My name is Seth.
What's the meaning of fate? You shall know.
Final round. Fight.
Show me everything.
Inside.
KO. Seth wins.
If I go too far, please forgive me.
我が美に酔いしれるがいい。
Final round. Fight. Perfect KO. Akira wins.
So then, you really want to go through the trouble? Fine. I'm president of the world, of the earth, and of the entire universe.
Final round. Fight. KO.
Not my day.
Luke wins.
Dan Hibiki, back after the ultimate improvement.
There's no escape.
Final round. Fight.
See ya! See ya!
Dan wins.
To honor father, Big Bro will do his best.
The main event! Yoisho!
My name is Seth.
Final round. Fight. Perfect KO. Honda wins.
I'll fight this battle. Why? Because it is my duty.
Final round. Fight.
Did you like that? Now stand up. Did you like that?
Perfect KO. She wins.
Come on. Let's turn up the heat.
Final round. Fight. Perfect KO. Sakura wins.
If you stand in my way, I will kill you.
Final round. Fight. KO.
It can't be over!
Ed wins.
Well then, where do you want me to break you first?
Be afraid.
Now you gaze upon your death!
Final round. Fight. KO. Jury wins.
No need for talk. Let's do this.
Final round. Fight! KO! Lara wins.
For those who I wish to protect, I will fight you.
Final round. Fight! KO! Zangief wins.
So then, you really want to go through the trouble? Fine!
Final round. Fight! KO! Cutting wins.
If you stand in my way, I will kill you.
Can't start the show without Star, right?
Final round. Fight!
Sonic! 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 Moonstone! Get up! Sonic! Sonic!
Perfect KO! Nash wins. Final round. Fight! KO! M. Bison wins.
It ain't too late to run off to Mom now.
So then, you really want to go through the trouble? Fine!
Final round. Fight!
No way, Scott. No way, Scott. You can go.
Perfect KO! Birdie wins. any fault of conflict.
こんなところでお会いするの。
Final round. Fight. KO. Dawson wins.
2分で終わらせるですよ。
Main event. Yoisho. Final round. Fight. Fawn wins. There's no escape!
Can't start the show without a star, right?
Final round. Fight! KO. Balrog wins.
案ずるな。手短に消してやる。
There's no escape! Final round. Fight!
楽しませる。楽しませる。どうだ。ほら。
Perfect KO. Urian wins. Final round. Fight. KO. Abigail wins.
Do the crime, you do the time.
Final round. Fight. Blanco wins.
Your words are not needed.
Harmony. That is the truth of what you must seek.
Final round. Fight. KO. Sagat wins.
Do the crime, you do the time.
Okay. 始めよう。
Final round. Fight. KO. Lucia wins.
Well then, let me test your skill.
Come on! Let's turn up the heat!
Final round. Fight. KO. Oro wins.
For those who I wish to protect, I will fight you!
我が美に酔いしれるがいい。
Final round. Fight.
Auntie! Fight! Fire left! Spinning axe! Auntie!
KO. Cammy wins.